Hi, everybody, and welcome to Ed Randall's Talking Rams. Here on this video series, we are paying tribute to those men and women, members of the Athletic Hall of Fame, who distinguished themselves on the field of play and brought honor to Fordham University. We hope you'll pass the word about this series to all your friends in the Fordham community and beyond, and have them tune in. We continue our series of conversations with a multiple record holder in track and field. She was a two-year captain of the cross-country and track teams. She set records and won 4 Atlantic 10 titles and still holds the Atlantic 10 meet records in the indoor 1,000 meters and mile, as well as the outdoor 800 meters. Before graduating in 2011, she received the Hobbs Family Award as Fordham's Female Student Athlete of the Year. Currently, she is in her 7th year at Manhattan College and her 2nd as the program's director of cross-country track and field. Fortunately for us, she's sitting still so we can chat with her. We welcome back to Fordham one of the nation's elite track and field performers who made an indelible mark, Hall of Fame class of 2011, and you can visit her plaque in the Rose Hill Gym. We welcome back Kerri Gallagher. Great to have you at the very top, Kerri. Thank you for not wearing green.
I thought about putting on a Jasper shirt, but I thought that wouldn't really be the best look for this interview, so you're welcome.
Your parents didn't do you any favors, I'm guessing, by spelling your first name with an I at the end rather than a Y. Am I correct about that? And have you had to spend your entire life correcting people with the spelling of your first name?
Yeah, I'm a natural born talker and I'm a natural born arguer. So it actually suited me pretty well. It set me up for great conversations and corrections all the time. But yeah, a lot of correcting.
What do you know about the history of Manhattan and Fordham? Because there was a time when it was really contentious, Kerri.
Yeah, and I know we still have the Battle of the Bronx and the rivalries between the schools are still pretty strong. But I know some alums from back in the 70s, and I know the track and field rivalry was very, very strong back during that time, to the point where a lot of the top runners out of the city, it was a battle between, Fordham and Manhattan in that recruiting. So then whoever got those top runners. But yeah, I mean, it's a little bit more friendly now, given that the head coach at Fordham is an old teammate of mine, but we certainly still like to beat each other.
So what's it like in those meets when Fordham is on the track and you're coaching Manhattan?
So a couple of years ago, I think it was 3 years ago, at the cross country Met Championship, my men won the men's race and the Fordham women won the women's race. And so for me, that was kind of a perfect scenario where I got to both beat Fordham and celebrate Fordham. So at the end of the day, I'm always rooting for my athletes that I'm coaching. I see their blood, sweat, and tears every day. But I'm always happy to see Fordham's success. That'll always be a part of me that won't ever go away. And maybe if my bosses watch this interview, I might get dinged for that. But yeah, it's an interesting dichotomy at these meets that I'm at with Fordham.
And of course, you can identify with those blood, sweat, and tears because of your great experience.
Yeah, it was a really formative 4 years for me at Fordham, and I really grew as an athlete, but just overall, as a human and in my preparation for my next steps. And so I'm eternally grateful to my time at Fordham and all the people that helped make it happen and then facilitated it.
There are so many records of yours to review, Kerri, that if we went through all of them, we wouldn't have any time to talk. So we'll just cut to the chase. How big is your trophy case?
I actually pared down my trophy case because I had quite a few. And as I moved a couple of times in the past few years, it became a lot to kind of carry things through. So I treasure the memories. The medals were great. The trophies were great. I had a lot of success at Fordham, particularly in my junior and senior years. But it's really the memories of my teammates and my coaches that stand out even more than those medals. When I looked at them, they didn't bring the same feelings to me as the pictures that I have back when I was still printing pictures and putting them in photo albums.
I'm assuming you always love to run. What are your earliest memories, Kerri, of running?
Yeah, it's interesting. I did not always love to run. I had hoped to be a basketball player. And so I started high school playing basketball on the JV team, and I did not get a lot of playing time. I don't really have the stature for a, traditionally successful basketball player. So my mom suggested I try cross country. And so some of my first memories of running formally on a team are in Jordan's basketball sneakers at Prospect Park, those first couple days of practice. With my high school coach wondering who this girl was and if she was going to make it around the field without collapsing. But it took off pretty quickly from there. I figured out, how to get a little better. I loved my team. I started to see success in races, and that just kind of got the ball rolling. So, yeah, I was a little bit of a late start to running formally, but once I did, I was all in.
How late would that be?
So sophomore year of high school was the first time I joined the cross country team. I had never run track or cross country prior to that.
Tell us, expand on that a little bit more, where you grew up.
I grew up in Brooklyn and Queens. I was born in Old Mill Basin. My family moved to Rockaway when I was in 3rd grade in Queens, but then I went to high school in Brooklyn. So I kind of claimed both boroughs. I would take the bus into Brooklyn and had a great experience at Bishop Kearney High School in Bensonhurst, and that's where my track and cross country career started. Yeah, so Brooklyn and Queens are kind of where I call home.
And a few Irish people living in out in those areas where you grew up.
Yeah, and it's funny. I actually live in Woodlawn now too, so I'm just bouncing from one Irish community to another.
Why Fordham?
I think a lot of it had to do with Coach Dewey. There's just something about during that recruiting process, I really connected well with him, and I think I felt I would be successful as an athlete with him. And the other piece was that Fordham was a Catholic institution and values-based. I don't think I could have put my finger on it at the time, but another top consideration for me was American University. And the coach there ended up being my coach post-collegiately. Right. And so I knew I almost chose American because I knew I wanted to run for this coach, Matt Centrowitz, but the school just wasn't a good fit, and I couldn't really figure out why. And then when I got to Fordham, I felt at home. I just felt comfortable. And as I look back on that, I can see that there were just some things kind of built into the mission of the school that aligned with my values and my upbringing, and allowed me to, it facilitated growth, in that spiritual side of my life when I didn't even know I was looking for it. So I would say probably a combination of my comfortability with Coach Dewey and the team, and then that mission-based part of Fordham University that really drew me there.
Had you ever been to Fordham before you became a student?
I did a quick visit to the Lincoln Center campus with the College Career Club back in high school. I was in the College Career Club because I heard you got free sandwiches when you went to visit these colleges. So I remember that being a very impressive visit, but I hadn't been.
So you went for the sandwich. You went for the sandwiches.
Yeah, and I guess Fordham must have had the best ones. I'm not sure, but I remember that visit to Fordham, the Lincoln Center campus, stuck out to me as one of my favorites of that club experience. But I hadn't been to the Rose Hill campus until my visit with the team. But as you know, spending time on Fordham's campus is very impressive. So, stepping foot on that campus and then spending the day there, it left a mark for sure.
Do you remember your first day on campus at Rose Hill?
A little bit. So we come in early as the cross country team for practice. And so that first day is a lot of, we do our health services meetings. We do our team meeting. We have our first run. So I remember it being a big distinction between me and who ended up being my good friend and then roommate in later years. My parents dropped me off and they said, all right, see you at Thanksgiving. And then my good friend is like in tears in the elevator, struggling to say goodbye to her parents. They helped set up her room. And then we left our parents and we went over to the team meeting and did all those things. And it was kind of like, wow, this is real. Family's now a couple boroughs away, and for her, a couple states away. And we're here to take care of business. So it was exciting. It was a little bit scary. But yeah, I remember it was an overall good day and the sun was shining. So that was good.
What school were you in?
I was in the Rose Hill College. So I was a math major.
You majored in mathematics and excelled because you were named to the Atlantic 10 All Academic Team in 2010 and 2011. Kerri, I'd like to disclose at this point in time that I went to summer school for trigonometry.
And that's okay. Everyone needs a second chance sometimes.
Oof. Math was difficult. The only thing I could figure out were earned run averages. That's what I could do. Favorite subject in school beyond math?
I loved computer science. So I stumbled into computer science my junior year in college, and I wish I had found it earlier, because I actually probably would have considered majoring or double majoring in that, but I ended up not having enough time. So I I took it as a minor instead.
Least favorite subject?
Spanish. Spanish is actually what drove me into mathematics, because I needed to figure out what major I could take that would be a Bachelor of Science, so that I only needed 2 semesters instead of 5. I was very, very clever in trying to figure out how to get things done.
You were maneuvering.
Yes.
Yeah, right. A professor, Kerri, who inspired you and made a lasting impression. Anybody come to mind?
Yeah, Professor Papadakis. So she was my first computer science professor, and then I took her for, I think, another 2 or 3 classes. But I stayed in close contact with her. I helped her. I forget what it wasn't TA, but I was doing some kind of professor assisting with her during that senior year. And she actually got me connected with Dino Kalankos, who ended up being my. He hired me at Morgan Stanley Smith Barney when I first graduated college. So for a number of different reasons, she really stands out, and I really appreciated her guidance, her help, her mentorship. So yeah, she definitely stands out.
Favorite building?
To look at, I think Keating. Keating is probably the most impressive. I spent time working at WFUV, so WFUV is in the basement of Keating, and so I've spent a good amount of time in that building. And then from a practical standpoint, probably McGinley. Spent a lot of time in the caf.
What do you do at WFUV?
So Keil McGale, Music of the Irish. It's a Irish music program on Sundays, is student run, and so I was a co-host for 2 years, junior and senior year.
Did you ever want to pursue broadcasting?
No, I guess I kind of grew in an interest in it as I was working there, but I kind of stumbled into that job a little bit too, in the sense that the previous host knew one of my teammates and had mentioned that he was going to be graduating and they'd be looking. So I applied, and that experience was really formative, because I really developed the ability to speak comfortably in front of large crowds, both in person and not. And we had to go through the painful process of air checks. So the producer of the station would listen to the show, the last week's show, with us, myself and my co-host Colleen, and we just had to listen to all the mistakes we made. But that was probably the quickest way to figure out how to stop making them.
I would think there would be a requirement for an Irish show that the host would be named Keri and Colleen.
I know. And I will tell you this, what I hid from them during the application process was I am 25% Italian in my heritage. But thankfully my name carries the Irish side.
Did you have any other jobs during the time you were at Fordham?
Yeah, I did ID checking in the dorms in my freshman year as a work study job. I think I did that for 2 years. WFUV. I worked for Kaplan Test Prep, and so I was teaching SAT classes for a little while I was there. And then your typical go home and work at the restaurant and make a little bit of money on the breaks. But at Fordham, WFUV is the primary one, and then the ID checking was another. And some tutoring and things like that.
While you were at Fordham, where do you live?
So my first year I lived in Alumni Court North, which has a new name now. I don't know what it's called, but and then I actually moved off campus my sophomore year on Bathgate Avenue. So I was in an apartment for the same apartment sophomore, junior, and senior year.
Any favorite hangouts?
Pugsley's, big fan of Pugsley's pizza. Yeah, I don't know. I think we did a lot of hanging out in the dorms and in our apartments. So I would say we probably spent the most time, yeah, hanging out, probably in my apartment.
This is the time in our show where we ask the guest, do you want to talk about the cafeteria food?
So I thought it was great. I know, and I tell this to my athletes now at Manhattan College who complain about the dining hall. I'm like, you're going to graduate and you're going to wish there was somebody preparing your meals every single day with options and variety. So I thought the food, I mean, it was an interesting time because I think they had to do some modifications to make sure they got a grade. I won't go into too much detail there, but my experience of the Fordham CAF is very positive.
Let me review a couple of records here. As a senior, you won 2 events and set 2 Atlantic 10 records. You won the 1,000-meter and the mile to earn first team all-conference honors and set meet records in both. In the spring of your senior year, won the 1,500 at the Raleigh Relays with one of the top women's times in the country that year. That was the second fastest women's 1,500 in Fordham history. Kerri, did you ever surprise yourself?
I think most of the time. I think I didn't really expect to see the success that I saw. But for me, I just wanted to contribute. And so with that being the primary focus, to win those races meant points for the team. It's like winning Raleigh Relays was really fun. I think it was good to get, I enjoyed that, those little highlights and spotlights. But for me, those races where I was contributing points were the most impactful to me. And so it was a slow progression. You can look at and if you use the 1,500 and even the 800, my primary events, you can see that I just got a little better every year, and I moved up in my placement in the conference every year. And at each level, you realize there's a little bit more to go after. So I think when I look back, I'm like, wow, I really came a long way from my freshman year self, which was pretty underwhelming in terms of performance and just overall attitude, to where I ended up senior year. I guess I did surprise myself in some ways, but during that time, it just was very natural, felt very natural for me.
Talk, if you will, about the challenge of being in a singular sport. It's all on you. Yes, there's a team, but it's all on you. This is not football. This is not basketball. This is not baseball.
Yeah, it's you have to find ways to capture that team atmosphere and use that energy for positive, because you're right, once you're on the line, what you do is the only thing that matters. Maybe you can draw some inspiration from a teammate's performance before, that went before you, or look forward to a teammate that's going to do well after you. But it's not like those other team sports where, a pass can help you get something done, or this or that. You have a little bit of that in the relays. But it really is still a team sport. You just have to do the work to approach it that way and, participate that way. So like I said, for me, and I've had teammates and I've had athletes that have been a little bit more individually focused, and it probably has a lot to do with their experience in the sport. It might have a lot to do with their upbringing. But for me, I'm from a large family, and I participated in team sports, very heavily up until I started track and field. So in my mind, I still always saw it as a team endeavor. And I drew a lot from, us being a unit, even if we had to accomplish the task totally on our own.
How did you handle the pressure?
There were not many races where I felt pressure, and I'm grateful for that, because I know a lot of athletes do struggle with performance pressure and performance anxiety, and I had my moments. I can relate in the small scale, but generally I think I felt ready for the task at hand. It really wasn't until my post-collegiate career that I struggled a little more with that. But during college, because I came in not really a high level athlete by many standards. I wasn't, a state champion. I wasn't, a very, very high level recruit out of high school. for me, I was always kind of outperforming rather than trying to live up to expectation. So I was outperforming, and then by the time I got to the level that I was, leading the conference in certain events and expected to win, I had already embraced that as my proper place. And so for me, I think while there was a little bit of that, I didn't worry about that too much. I was more focused on just accomplishing the task I knew I was capable of. So yeah.
Who motivated you beside you?
I had some really good teammates, and I remember distinctly one teammate she's 2 years older than me, Kat Riley, and I remember sophomore year after one of the relays. I was pretty, I guess a lot of us are immature freshman year of college and sophomore year of college, but she said something to me. I can relate. Raise your hand if you were immature freshman
right
year.
Here. Yes. Yes.
But she said something to me that basically made me realize that when it came down to a tough decision in a race, whether I should go for it or kind of, settle and be complacent, I was often choosing the complacency side, looking for the attention of my teammates to pat me on the back and say it'll be better next time, rather than wanting the success in the race and willing to take the risk. And so she said something that just kind of opened that up for me and made me realize that I wanted sympathy more than I wanted results. And when I realized that, that shifted big time. And so she was a big inspiration for me, because she's just kind of willing to not criticize me on that, but just help me identify it. And so that kind of changed my approach to how I approach my teammates. And it's kind of shapes how I coach a little bit too, that memory. So she's one of many, many people who, shaped and formed my career, but that one stands out.
Talk, if you will, about the coaches and the strength and conditioning people who helped you along the way.
Yeah, we were in the weight room, I think it was twice a week. And we had different kind of styles of lifting each year that I was there. We had some change in the coaching while I was there. So there were different philosophies that came in. But the one thing that was consistent was the dedication to the student athletes. So one thing I got to enjoy in my career was showing up and doing the work and trusting the people in charge of those areas. So strength and conditioning was one, and then Coach Dewey wrote the workouts for my event group. And so, like I said, I could just show up and do the work and know that it was going to have productive outcomes, and then slowly learn how it applied and what it was doing for me. But I was able to just extend that kind of blind trust on the front end. And so that's something that not a lot of people can say they have in their career, and that I did have at Fordham, that I think really helps lead to my success.
What do you think drove you as an athlete?
Just the desire to, I don't know. That's a good question. In every space I entered, I wanted to be the best. So in the early, in my freshman year, where I had the opportunity to do that was on relays. Sophomore year, I had a little more access to that in the Met Championship and a little bit at 810s. And by junior year, I kind of had established a space in the 810. I always wanted to prove that I belonged by getting there and then staying there. So, for me, it wasn't enough to just win an 810 championship. I wanted to win another one, because I didn't want anything to be a fluke. If I ran a PR, I wanted to run that time again, because I didn't want to be a one-hit wonder. So a lot of that, I wanted to establish my presence. I wanted to make sure it was legitimate. So, once you run the time, it's legitimate. But for me, I wanted to run it 2 or 3 more times to make sure people knew I belong.
We spoke with Kirsten Green, as you know, and she talked about running against the boys. Did you run against the boys?
That probably was a little more relevant for her in her time at Fordham. I didn't train with the guys. I used, one of the nice parts about being in a combined program is that if, I was the top runner on my team at Fordham. There wasn't anyone else at that time really at the level that I was starting to reach, but we had some men in the program who were kind of there or close. Brian Schmidt, he and I think ran the 800 meter school record the same day at the same meet. So it was kind of nice to be able to parallel my efforts with the men's team. But I didn't train with them. I didn't train against them. There might've been a little bit of, I want to have the better relative result, just to show that the women's program is just as good. But I would imagine her experience might've been a little different in that regard than mine.
Did you ever wish that you could have received more notoriety for your accomplishments, the kind that are accorded to team sports?
No, maybe there was just lack of awareness. For me, I was happy where I was at. I was happy with the success I was seeing. I was happy with putting these efforts out for the team and with the team. And so I didn't really look elsewhere at what I wasn't getting. That didn't seem productive to me.